cases close, but some never rest. When silence screams, we listen. This is dead and wrong.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Liz,
And I'm Sam.
and this is Dead and Wrong, your weekly podcast for all things dead. People, ghosts, animals, you name it. If it's dead, we're probably gonna cover it.
And today we're back to a regular Liz episode.
We are, and pretty sure Sam's on a little bit of crack cocaine today.
I've had too much sugar.
Clearly.
Definitely giddy.
So today, we will actually be covering an unsolved murder that has been quoted as Kansas City's most perfect murder.
Ooh.
And with that, before Sam starts saying some weird, crazy stuff, let's get started. Dead and Wrong presents Episode 9, The Unsolved Case of Room 1046. So, it is January 2nd, 1935. 19-year-old Roland T. Owen checks into the President Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. Roland requests a room without a window and a few floors up. He was able to have his request met and was given the key for room 1046. Roland is dressed neatly in a black overcoat, and the only items he had on his person were a black hairbrush, a comb, and a tube of toothpaste.
The essentials.
So he is escorted to the 10th floor by a young bellboy by the name of Randolph Propst. And while they were on their way to the room, Roland actually makes a comment about how he had been staying at a different hotel, but that it had cost him $5 a day, and that was just too pricey.
Yeah.
$5 a day at a hotel?
Back then, that's expensive.
I guess that's true.
And now I have to do math.
Well,
Keep reading.
I'm going to keep reading while you do that. So a maid named Mary Septio meets with Roland that day. She was allowed into his room as he was combing his hair because she was there to clean. Now, she was a little surprised because a woman had been in the room prior to Roland and she didn't know that anybody new had checked in. So she already kind of had her routine with this woman, so she kind of just came in, but he was like, hey, it's fine, you just clean while I'm here, ignore me. So she does her job. And as she's getting ready to leave, Roland stands up and tells her, hey, I'm gonna be heading out. Finish what you're doing, just leave the door unlocked because I have a friend that's gonna be showing up and waiting for me. Well, Mary does that, and then she returns later in the afternoon around 4 and finds Roland still in the room, which was odd because she'd seen him leave. And he was just sitting on the bed in the dark with the lights off and fully dressed.
But how does she know that was Roland?
She'd seen his face.
But it was lights off, completely dark.
Well, there's also the voice. And when you more than likely opened the door, light was shining in.
Well, on a side note, the $5 back then is equal to $118 today.
I wouldn't mind that because some hotels are very pricey where it's like $300 a night.
Yeah, that's like stupid expensive.
So, the next day, January 3rd, Mary returns again and finds that the door is locked. So this normally wouldn't be weird, but apparently these doors could lock both from the inside and from the outside. And this door was locked from the outside. Well, I mean, that was pretty simple. She moved the handle and was able to go inside. And lo and behold, she finds Roland, which is weird because that means someone locked him inside the room. And once again, it was dark, though there was one little lamp on that did shine a little bit of light in the room. Roland just told her to clean, do her thing, and so she did. And as she was cleaning, she found a note on the desk, and it read, "Hey Dawn, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Wait." As she is finishing up cleaning and doing the last of her chores, Roland receives a phone call, and he answers it within the room, doesn't bother to tell her to leave or anything, and so she overhears him saying, "I don't want to eat, I'm not hungry, I just had breakfast." She finishes her things and just kind of goes on about her chores. Weirded out, but who is she to judge? So, one thing to note before getting to the President's Hotel is that Ronald had stayed at a few other hotels. At first, he stayed at the St. Regis Hotel at the corner of Linwood Boulevard and the Peso. This hotel, St. Regis, actually still stands today, but it's an apartment complex now. He then stayed at the Muleback Hotel December 31st through January 2nd, but while he was staying there, he used a different name. He checked in under Eugene Scott.
Why are we using different names?
I don't know. But while he was staying in these two hotels, so St. Regis and Muleback, he apparently had a male companion staying with him by the name of Donald Kelso, because Donald had also signed in. They believe that this was the Don subject in the letters in the phone call. So back to the day that Mary found him after he was locked in the room, she returned around 4 p.m. And from what I gathered is that's the time that she checks in on guests. She'll check on them in the morning and then come back around 4 p.m. to refill the towels. And she heard two men arguing within the room. They quit arguing and went quiet when she knocked, and a man she described as having a rough voice, who she knew was not Roland, asked her what she wanted. She just said, "Hey, I'm bringing fresh towels." And the man was like, "We don't need any." Mary left, but thought this was odd because she knew she collected the towels when she had been in the room in the morning. So she's like, well, that can't be true. It's odd, but she has a job to do. And apparently no one else from the hotel staff heard from Roland for the rest of the evening. But that didn't mean weird things weren't gonna start happening. In the later evening, the hotel switchboard operator found that the room's phone was off hook. And so he sent Randolph, the bellboy, to speak with Ronald and have him put it back on the hook. It should also be noted that Roland had only apparently signed up to only be at the hotel for one night. So he's now going into night 2 and the phone is off the
Okay.
hook. So Randolph finds a do not disturb sign on the door, but knocks anyways. He's invited in by a man with a deep voice. Randolph tries the door, but it's locked. So he speaks through the door again. And this time the man's like, "Hey, just turn on the light," but he still hasn't let Randolph in. So Randolph is just like, this guy's probably drunk, which makes sense. So he just yells through the door for the guest to put the phone back on the hook. So 7:10 in the morning arrives and the phone is still off the hook, never put on, so a different bellboy is sent up. He yells through the door like the first time, and he's told by someone in the room, all right. He thinks the man heard him, so he leaves. Well, the phone is never put back on the hook. So about an hour and 20 minutes later, Harold Pike, a bellhop, is sent up. There is no answer when he knocks, and the do not disturb sign is still up, so he uses his own key and lets himself in. And he finds Roland naked, in bed, and breathing heavily. He notices a dark spot on the bed, but doesn't really look too much into it because whatever way Roland was acting made Harold think he was also drunk. So he just
Mm.
puts the phone on the hook and leaves the room. And if I remember correctly, in one of the articles I read, I believe there was alcohol in the room.
Okay,
And
that one
that's
makes
why
sense.
he thinks he's drunk. So 10:30 arrives and Randolph is still working, so they send Randolph up again. And this time, when he opens the door, he finds Roland on his knees near the door with his arms propped up on his elbows and holding his head, which had blood coming out of it. Yes, basically. Just imagine being on the floor, kind of hunched over, holding up your head.
That's what I'm like doing over here. I'm like, he's on his knees, elbows on the floor, and holding his head up. It's a weird position.
If there was alcohol involved. So he turns on the lights, sees more, and at this point he sees that blood is everywhere. It's on the walls, it's on the bed, it made it up to the ceiling. And eventually they even realize it's all over the bathroom. So Randolph immediately runs to his assistant manager and tells him what happened. The assistant manager gets a hold of a doctor and a police, and both Randolph and the manager go back up to the room to wait for law enforcement to arrive. Well, they find that Roland has managed to move himself and basically fell over in front of the door. So when they got there, they had to shove the door open. And they managed to help Roland up and place him against the bathtub in the bathroom. This was because obviously it was brighter in the bathroom and they wanted to look at the extent of the damage. So
Mm-hmm.
they discovered that he had been stabbed in the chest multiple times. He had a clothesline tied around his neck, his ankles, his wrist, and he had severe bruising around his neck, which would indicate he was strangled. Later, once the doctors get to him and the medical examiner gets to him, it's discovered he had a punctured lung and 3 different skull fractures, which were caused by blows to the head. The doctor who was called was Harold Flanders of Kansas City General Hospital. They were able to determine that due to the drying rate of the blood, that the doctor believed the first wounds were made 6 to 7 hours prior, which would have been between 4 and 5 a.m. And so I'm betting that when Harold had found him in the room, when the bellhop found him in the room,
Mm-hmm.
he was probably already beat and bloody, and I bet that dark spot he ignored was blood.
Oh, when he went to go hang up the phone, he was laying on the bed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He thought Roland was just drunk because of the scene in the alcohol.
Okay.
So, obviously, investigators and police show up and they start searching the room, see what kind of clues they can get, and they discover that all of his clothing, some of his other belongings, and even some of like the quote unquote toiletries that hotels give out, like soap, hair wash, etc., they were gone. All they were able to find was a torn necktie label, a hairpin, an unsmoked cigarette, a glass that had a woman's fingerprint on it, and a bottle of can't think of it, some kind of acid. Not like a citric acid, acetone or something like that.
Interesting.
So that's all that was left. Roland was taken to the local hospital where he sadly succumbed to his injuries, which doesn't surprise me for back in the day. He died just after midnight on January 5th. The last words anybody heard from him was to the detectives and the doctor while he was still in the hotel room, which was simply that this was not a suicide. No one had hurt him, and he simply fell against the bathtub and hit his head. So he fell against the bathtub and hit his head, and it caused multiple stab wounds to appear on his chest.
And his legs and hands being wrapped, and the bruises around his neck like he had been choked. It sounds like fantasy play went way too far.
Remember, we don't kink shame, we simply kink ask why.
Oh, I'm not king shaming at all. Just fantasy play went too far. They did not have the same password.
They
Safe
did
word.
not. They did not. So the investigators
Minneapolis.
finished up with the room and just did quick interviews with some people around the hotel that were both workers and guests. The neighbors next door said that at one point they heard a man and a woman talking loudly and cussing at each other. The elevator operator stated he had escorted a prostitute up to the 10th floor, but didn't know what room she went to. And Mary kind of just told them about her interactions with him, the weirdness, the whole we don't need towels when she knew they needed them, and how he was actually very polite, which even Randolph the bellboy reiterated that he was still very polite at all times. So all of this is already pretty weird. Clearly, his injuries were not from falling in the bathtub. Well, what's even more weird is that Roland T. Owen apparently didn't exist, at least not within Los Angeles, because he signed, Roland T. Owen from Los Angeles. And this was mainly discovered because they allowed those thousands of locals to come in and attempt to identify the body, and no one could. The local police even went as far as corresponding with departments from around the United States to see if maybe Roland matched any of their missing men. They
Hmm.
didn't. And in between this point and identifying Roland, there were other weird things.
No.
So, I know. The police eventually make the announcement through like the newspaper that Roland is going to be buried in Pottersfield. And once this is pushed out through all the newspapers, they get an anonymous phone call. This man tells them, "I'll pay for the burial as long as they bury Roland in Memorial Park." They ask him, "Why?" and he said he wanted Roland to be buried near his sister. So apparently Roland had a sister who was already dead. So the cops kind of pushed him more and was like, is there, like, would you happen to know what happened, etc., etc.? And he started getting upset and told them Owen hadn't played the game fair and cheaters usually get what's coming to them. He
So, are we
claimed,
like mobsters?
maybe, he claimed Roland had been engaged to one woman but was cheating on her with another, and that's what caused this all.
I mean, I could see it.
But basically, from there, he literally just hung up and the conversation was over. Well, when the day of the funeral arrives, they also get 13 American Beauty roses with a card. And in the card is just written, Love Forever, Louise. They do try to trace back the card and the flowers, but they aren't able to get anything out of it. So, for months after this, the police would send out letters with all of Roland's information to see if anybody knew who he was, but they were also getting letters. So these letters would contain images of people who were missing, like sons, brothers, fathers, friends, etc. Apparently, Roland had a pretty good sized scar on his head.
Okay.
Looked like some kind of burn. So it was very easy to distinguish because, like, that part of the scar he couldn't grow hair out of.
Okay.
So it was like a good sized chunk of hair missing. And it would take roughly a year and a half, a little bit over, before a woman named Ruby Ogletree would come forward with Roland's true identity. And this happened in 1936. Someone had approached her with a news article that had reached Birmingham and was like, Isn't this Artemis? She looked at the photo, saw the scar, and instantly knew who it was. So Roland was actually 17-year-old
Not
Artemis
19.
Ogletree. Nope, he is only 17.
Wow.
He is a young man from Birmingham, Alabama, and he was Ruby's son. Artemis left his home in April of 1934 with his friend Joe Simpson to hitchhike across the country. They apparently made it to Los Angeles. Remember, he was Roland Owen from Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And then went their separate ways, and somehow Artemis made it to Kansas City by mid-August. So now that they finally had the true identity, which I will be referring to Roland as Artemis from now on because that is his real name, more started to come out. So this case was featured in two magazines known as American Weekly and Official Detective Stories, and it was labeled as America's Strangest and Perfect Murder Crime. It was very strange. I don't think it was the perfect murder crime. I just don't think they had the technology back in the day.
I I agree with that. And strange. It was probably strange for back then.
I mean, today, this day and age, I don't think it would be very strange.
No. No.
But when these articles were pushed out, it caused so many letters to pour in with tips and theories because obviously when something crazy happens, so many people want to be involved.
Oh yeah.
So one woman stated that this whole thing seemed like a screenplay she had seen about a young man who got caught up with a mobster's girl. He was probably just hoping it was that.
Probably.
Someone from Iowa believed the killer was a civil engineer because of the shape of the R in some of the signatures of letters that the police got.
R, like a pirate. R.
Yeah, and I couldn't really. So they made the assumption that some of the letters that, and we'll go over them, that had been sent to his mother were written by the killer. Because, as we will go over here in a little bit, Ruby was receiving letters from Artemis after he had passed.
That's creepy.
And so they
Yeah.
believe that the R in Artemis looked like the shape of an R a civil engineer would make. Didn't realize they had special R's.
I didn't either.
So there's that. And then someone from Seattle believed that Artemis was one of his old friends whose father had been a high up official in the German army and the killer was a spy. Basically, they were killing him to get revenge against the dad.
007.
Yes. So, obviously, and as I'm sure none of us are surprised to hear, none of these tips panned out. But Ruby, Artemis's mother, believed that she knew who the killer was. And this came from all the letters she had been receiving down to a phone call and a conversation that she had with somebody. So let's talk about this stuff. So, as I said, she had been receiving letters from Artemis before she even realized he was dead. And they started getting sent these odd letters after he was dead. So, January 1936, roughly 2 weeks after his death, Ruby received a typed letter from her son saying he was in New York City. This right away was very weird to her because he didn't know how to type. And he only had been using handwriting for his prior letters. And on top of that, with his handwriting, he didn't flourish the details. He kind of just went straight to the point. But the typing did have detail. And she was like, it doesn't even sound like him.
So two types of people. Like I'm a straight to the point person and you're a lavish writer.
Exactly. So in April, same year, she receives another letter. And this time, her son tells her he's sailing for France. It's like he's trying to cover his tracks, make a story.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
And then on August 12th, she receives a long distance phone call from Memphis, Tennessee. The caller is claiming to be a friend of Artemis's named Godfrey Jordan. He tells Ruby that the two of them met in Cairo, Egypt. Artemis was basically his hero because he saved him from a band of thugs. And so he saved him from the band of thugs. Well, Godfrey left, but Artemis didn't. He decided to live in Cairo because while he was there, he met a wealthy woman and they got married. And she was from Cairo, so he stayed with her. But the best part is the reason why Godfrey was calling and why Artemis hadn't written to her. Because apparently in this fight, Artemis lost both of his thumbs. So he couldn't.
I really love this.
In total, they spoke for about 45 minutes, and then it kind of just ended there. And the whole conversation, Ruby knew something wasn't right. Might have been him losing his thumbs in a fight.
Comparing a woman in Cairo?
Yeah, no, it was the thumbs. Apparently there were more letters sent after this, but they've never been made public. And the last letter she believed was from her son. He had been in Kansas City at one of the hotels and was talking about how he made a friend who was opening up a new business and who wanted Artemis to go in on it with him. And he was super excited for it. But he was like straight to the point, like I had said. He doesn't flourish details. I met someone, he's starting a business, he wants me to join in. So I do want to note that at one point the police did have two suspects. So the first one was a man by the name Thomas Wilbur Barlow. He was investigated in 1940. While living in Little Blue, Missouri, Thomas had been convicted of crimes against nature, which to me is a little off because crimes against nature versus torture and murder, a little different. But the arresting...
People start somewhere.
True. But the arresting officer thought that his signature looked like the signature of Donald Kelso in the hotel registry. Well, they questioned him for like 10 hours, and apparently even from the get-go, he was like back and forth, wishy-washy, and he was just all over the place and was very confused halfway through, even with what he was saying. Well, then they determined he had advanced syphilis, and so they think it was going to his head.
Not going to, it was already there.
Yes. So the second suspect was Joseph Ogden, and he was T.J. Higgins' prime suspect. Higgins was the chief of detectives for Kansas City Police at the time. So Ogden had already been convicted for the gruesome murder of Oliver George Sincow. Ogden had shot, dismembered, cut off a distinct tattoo, and then stuffed Oliver's nude body into a steamer trunk that was bound for Memphis.
Wow. That
Yeah,
guy just
he
really
went
went for it.
he all for it.
Yeah.
And they also looked into the fact that Ogden had been in 2 insane asylums and like 3 different prisons throughout his life.
Okay.
One of the insane asylums were in Birmingham, and while he was in one of the prisons, he had escaped for some time and was known to be gay. So when they
I
were
mean, does that mean anything? I mean, today's age, it wouldn't mean anything, but
back then, yes, that
not like
wasn't.
he's a bad person.
Well, no, but back then, that was wrong. In the 1930s, I don't think it was something very approved of.
Wasn't approved of, but I'm saying that because he was gay didn't make him a bad person.
No.
Now,
It,
him doing all the other
it
bad
might
stuff,
have been
that
the
made him a
murder
bad person.
and the dismembering. Just thinking. So, eventually he escaped, he was caught. So, when they went after him, he was back in prison, and so they were able to get handwriting samples. They compared those to Donald Kelso's within the hotel registries. Well, they didn't match.
Okay.
But one of his known aliases and one of the ones he mainly used was in fact Donald Kelso. But
Oh.
handwriting didn't match. The handwriting samples had been compared by the FBI, and so because there was no match, they said Ogden was not the killer. And basically, from this point, the case went cold. They would open it up every now and then and work on it, but they really didn't have anything. Well, even though the police said basically, hey, cold case, we're done, Ruby was not done. Because Ruby believed that Artemis's killer was in fact his friend Joe, the one he had gone hitchhiking with. She did report all of this to the police, every reason why she believed Joe, which we will be going over in a second, but they basically told her, "Hey, we interviewed him and we rolled him out as a suspect." So, why exactly did Ruby think Joe was the killer? Well, according to Ruby, after the fact, she spent years trying to meet up with him in Birmingham because obviously he was technically the last person to see her son alive.
Yeah.
And almost every single time she was stood up. He just wouldn't show up. She was able to finally confront him on December 28th, 1939, and after their conversation, she was even more certain that Joe had killed her boy. So
Mama Bear knows.
So remember the phone call she got from Memphis, the one with the telling him about Cairo, Egypt, and marriage and him
No
losing
thumbs.
his thumbs?
Yeah.
So according to Ruby, the man on the phone, that Godfrey fella, and Joe, their voices were oddly familiar.
Okay.
Joe also told her during their conversation that he actually didn't think the case would ever be solved because there weren't any clues for the detectives to work off of.
Oh, really, Joe?
How does he know? I mean,
Hmm.
I guess it's possible the police would just put it out there, but how do you truly know?
You would think you'd want the case to be solved since it was your friend, Joe.
If that's even your real name? Lots of aliases around here.
Yeah, there is.
So, there was also the fact that the Kansas City police had made a comment about this being the perfect crime, and Joe raved about that in front of Artemis's mother. In fact, Joe said, "It is the perfect crime. They'll never be able to get the ones who killed him."
And Joe said this to Artemis's mom.
Yes,
It's kind of a dick move.
very dick move. And Ruby, near the end of this conversation with him, she calls Joe out about the whole voice ordeal, stating that, it's odd that you sound so much like the man who called me from Tennessee. And according to him, Joe's face went really red. He couldn't look her in the eyes. He got very nervous and basically ended their little meetup.
I think that says a lot about that.
And if that doesn't say a lot, the fact that that was the last time Ruby ever saw Joe probably also means something.
Yeah. I do want to know why they never looked for that prostitute. Stop trying to kiss your cat, dude.
Just want to give him
Why
a
did they look
hug.
for the prostitute?
That I don't know. And sadly, that is all I have on this case.
That's not enough.
That
I
is
feel like
unsolved murder.
they did not investigate it enough. They probably thought it was like BDM, there was a prostitute, he might have had same sex relationships. And back in those days, they probably just went, okay, we did a little bit. Now we're going to dust our hands off and good job, guys. pat on the back.
I did just quickly look up to see why they didn't like go after the female visitor slash prostitute, and they said it was mainly because they could never identify her.
Good for her.
Apparently, they actually brought up, and not correction, when he denied being attacked and that no one hurt him and that this woman was visiting him, they believed he was actually protecting her, that they knew her and just he didn't want to get her in trouble.
Oh, so he was a good guy. Decent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the end of your unsolved case of room 1046.
It is. And to this day, it
Oh.
is still unsolved. I will say, and this was just something I read randomly. I forget what document, but I wasn't able to find much else on it, so I didn't really look it up. The Don they were talking about, they don't always. There's also the chance that it wasn't Donald Kelso, but like, I know there's a term for the mafia that is Don.
Ooh. Wonder what that is.
I'm gonna look it up real quick.
While she's looking that up, we do have socials up and running, and we will provide updates of episode releases and any fun things we come across. We have a Facebook and Instagram, and you can listen to these episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and now Amazon. Liz actually did it all. Congratulate her.
Yes, I finally got it working on YouTube. I'm so proud of myself.
Everything is under Dead and Wrong Podcast. And please feel free to send in theories, case suggestions, things that you know about, participated in, or if you just want to send us fun pictures of your pets, because Liz and I love animals and we will be thrilled to see your furry, scaly, you can look at skillies, feathery babies.
What if it's like a little, like, what's bearded dragon? Those things are so cute.
Ugh, I don't do anything scales.
I
No,
will look at
thank
the
you.
scales. If you have like a
Nope.
bearded dragon or a lizard, I would make sure like put scales in the title so Sam doesn't look at them.
Yeah, I don't want to see it. Anyways, send all the fun, lovely pictures to deadandwrongpodcast@gmail.com. And Liz, did you find out what Dawn means
It
in the
is. So
mafia?
Dawn is usually the leader because it means like dominant.
Oh,
So now it makes me wonder, was this an organized crime thing? Did he get, because at this point in time in Kansas City, there were some dirty things going on with organized crime. It was an issue.
it was everywhere.
Well, it was a big issue in Kansas City. They actually believe that Higgins, the chief of detectives, they believe he was. I read somewhere he was actually dirty.
Hmm.
He caused a lot of issues.
That fits a lot too.
So did someone hook him up with the girl and he didn't give the money and the Don was upset?
Maybe, or maybe he was already associated with the gangs and ran into him from all his
Travels?
traveling around, and he made him mad, and now the Don needed to talk to him, but the Don didn't really want to talk to him. The Don wanted to just beat him and leave him for dead.
What if the woman basically drugged him so he couldn't fight back as much? And then the Don came in. And the man and woman arguing that was overheard was Don and the woman arguing about what to do with him.
That's a good one too.
I do think Joe is involved. I think Joe is who got him involved in everything.
The friend, yeah. He's suspicious. And those missing thumbs too.
Yo, you can't do anything if you don't have your thumbs.
I'm pretty sure you can. You'll figure it out. Many people do. Hurts. Anyways, everybody, we will see you next week with another episode filled with all things
Dead.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everybody.
I'm going to bed now.
Good night.
Good night.